Our next presenter is going to be Susan Revard. She is an animal care specialist at Disney Animal Kingdom. Today's topic is going to be understanding seasonal changes in weight in Malayan flying fox using the newly constructed bat scale at Disney Animal Kingdom. Susan?
Well, thank you so much for having me. We are so excited to be part of this symposium and seeing everybody. So we'll start with this. We're going to understanding the seasonal changes in weight in the Malayan flying fox using a newly constructed bat scale. Okay, the Malayan flying fox are found in the order of Megachiroptera, and they are known to be one of the largest fruit bats. They can be found in large roosting groups ranging from tens to thousands throughout the rainforest of Southeast Asia. And of course, these bats consume fruit, nectar, and they provide important ecosystem services such as dispersing and pollinating many different plant species and have been known to regenerate deforested areas. Okay, the wild flying foxes have observed to go through seasonal changes in weight linked to breeding season. Prior to breeding season, the males, they can actually gain an average of 15% of their body weight in preparation for breeding. However, they can also lose the weight due to restricted foraging opportunities while defending the territories and breeding the girls. So let's look at our boys. And like Ben mentioned, we have 11 male Malayan flying fox. They range from 6 to 10. During the day, the bats live in a 4,000 square foot habitat that is about 24 feet high with wire mesh ceilings. There are trees, ropes, vines, and bushes, and we use pine needles as ground cover. There's also a viewing area for our guests, and then we offer each bat a skewer of fruit during the day with a little water bottle. Now, at dusk, the bats are going to leave the habitat and enter a transfer tunnel, which is made of gunite, wire mesh, and ropes. This tunnel leads to their night holding. Now, when the boys get to the night holding, it has their prescribed diet, and we spread it out, and probably about, I think we've got 54 bowls back there, which allows plenty of opportunities for each one to get their fair share. This holding area is climate controlled, offering heat and air conditioning, and the bats will have access back into the yard unless our cold weather guidelines take effect or we have any maintenance work. So that's kind of our boys and where they're hanging out. So the keepers were starting to notice significant changes in body conditioning and food consumption during different times of the year. So in the winter, the bats would transfer to the night house, remain there until morning, eat all their food, but visually they appeared lean and slender. And in the summer, the keepers would notice that the bats would come in, and we have some videos. They would come in, then they would go right back out, and they would be robust and a little bit on the hefty side. So looking at this picture, one would think that they were different bats, but spoiler alert, it's the same guy, no judgment. We're not judging him except for being so cute. These photos were actually taken about 5 months apart, and the photo kind of emphasizes what we were seeing. So we just really wanted to understand the weight fluctuations to see if we needed to change our management style. So prior to the development of the scales we're going to talk about, our bats were usually weighed one time a year during their annual exam, which we did, of course, at Halloween, because that's the best. We would weigh them there, and our guests would be able to see them when they were in their annual exam. So our first scale, let's take a look at that. Well, we came up with this box scale. It wasn't great. We used it mostly when medical or social environment circumstances prevented them from shifting into the habitat. The animal had to be removed from the group to get a weight. And some bats were fine with this. Others would be a little stressed. But it did take a while to get them to voluntarily participate. So scale number 2 was the perch scale. Now this one was actually made by one of our hospital keepers, and it was typically used when the bats were at the hospital, and it was used mostly on the calmer bats, and that way the ones that were having some weight concerns, they were able to weigh them more frequently. But moving forward, these two were great, but they just weren't really what we were looking for. So we made our wish list. We wanted to be able to capture weights more regularly. We wanted a scale that was economical, and if it broke, it wouldn't break the bank. We would be able to order another one and get it pretty quickly. We wanted the bats to voluntarily participate in weight collection, of course. We wanted them to go over it daily, whether they knew it was a scale or not. And then we wanted the scale to read in a little bit of the details. So this is what we came up with, our newly designed scale. Now, first of all, before we talk about it, I know it might look a little crazy, but this little the gray scale in there is actually the same scale that we used in the other 2 designs. It is we call it postal scale. They're pretty common and pretty easy to get. So this scale, well, it's actually, we say it's a newly designed, but it's been with us for 10 years. Time flies when you're working with Flying Fox, that's for sure. So we placed this scale in the transfer tunnel, knowing the bats would interact with the scale going to and from the habitat. It consists of wire mesh box that attached to 2 marine grade high density polyurethane board, which is also known as starboard. We use that term as well. One of the pieces rests on top of the scale while the other piece rests underneath. The upper piece of the board with the wire mesh attached to it has 4 holes drilled into each corner and slides over the bolts attached to the ceiling. I know this is a lot, and if anybody wants the design, where Shirley can talk later and we can give you some help with this. When the bats move over the box, it pulls down on the upper board onto the scale so we can get a weight. So let's just look at a different look at this thing. Okay, we have the reader on the side, on the left there. The cord that goes to the scale is actually wrapped in fire hose. So that way the bats won't get tangled up in it, and it keeps them safe from the wire. You can see that the scale is in the transfer tunnel, and it's made very closely to the same materials as the tunnel. I mean, when the bats get on it, they do have to come down a little bit, but really not any lower than some of the ropes. So now what did this look like when the bats were trying to get used to it? So when we first put the scale in, some of the bats went on it right away. Some of it were like, no, I think I'm going to go around it. And we were perfectly fine with that. But once they were used to going in and out of this tunnel twice a day, it was fairly easy to stop them on the scale, give them a treat, or even kind of hold our hand up, and they would stay without any problem. So let's see our data. Okay, so weight data was collected from 2014 to 2023 on two separate groups. Okay, so we had one group from 2014 to 2019, and then we actually switched the entire group and got a whole new group of bats that we have currently now. So we have tried this scale on two totally different groups of bats, and it has worked great. We did see that some of the bats gained and lost an average of 15 to 20% of their body weight during breeding season. And then the weights correlated with the food consumption and breeding season. Now, the highest weights were just prior to breeding season. And then the weight decrease occurred as the bats would remain in the day roost, defending their territories, which restricted the foraging opportunities. And we made a graph. Let's check this one out. So this is only for the first 2 years. So when we started to weigh the bats, we were like, okay, let's look and see what this data looks like. And you can definitely see that in the earlier months, the bats have a steady increase, constantly increasing. They're getting as big as they're going to get. And then all of a sudden it drops off. And when it does drop off, then of course we're seeing a bunch of food left and them staying in the day roost, waiting for the girls to come. So what we know now, by developing a voluntary weight monitoring database, zookeepers are able to better understand the seasonality of the food consumption and weight fluctuations due to breeding season without increasing stress to the animals. Voluntary weight collection, which can be done daily if needed, provides information for the zoo managers, the nutritionists, the veterinarians, if there's a potential health concern compared with if animals are just gaining or losing weight with normal seasonal changes, ultimately resulting, of course, in better animal care. So I did finish early, so if anybody has any questions.
I do have one for you. With a smaller colony, are you able to monitor the sires? And then if so, do you find them seeking one location in the enclosure?
Okay, we do have just an all-male population of the Malayan flying fox. We can monitor location, and that's something we really want to dive into because during breeding season, they do change their location. And prior to breeding season, we see them in the entire habitat. And then towards breeding season, we actually see them kind of conjugate together. And that's when they're defending their territories. But we do just currently have boys.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What happened to the first group of bats when you switched to a new group?
Okay, so we work really closely with Brian over there at the Luby Conservancy. They are so close to us, just a few hours away. And we just swapped groups. We got 11 younger bats, and our older bats went back to Luby. So when we got them, we decided we were going to follow the same routine and get weights on them and really start learning about a whole new collection. So it was actually pretty fun for us to try to get them into the habitat and train them to go out and come back into their night house.
Thank you, Susan. Do you see any weight fluctuation in female bats or just males?
Well, I would love to tell you we know about the girls, but we just have the boys. So I don't know about the females. We just see it in the boys. We just see them get heavier and heavier and heavier. And, you know, at first it was a little concerning. Do we need to adjust the diet? But after seeing that they pretty much regulate themselves, during this breeding season and come back to the weight they started at. Yeah, so we don't have girls, but yeah, so I really can't answer that one.
Thank you. Once the bats were used to the scales, did you have any issues with dominating the scales as they learned the reward? With a large colony, would we see the same bats going on them?
That's a great question. We actually didn't see that as they passed the scale. I mean, it is kind of a reward to go back into the holding area or back into the exhibit. So they were fine stopping on the scale, but it's not something that they wanted to stay for long periods of time, because they were transitioning to a location, whether it be the holding area or to the habitat.
Okay, thank you. How do you identify individual bats?
Well, we do take a lot of pictures and pretty much try to look at different markings, different color patterns, different personalities. That's actually a big one. Some bats just act different than the other bat. But yeah, we try to look at different markings and take lots of pictures, and that way we will learn them. But they do all look different to us. It is a little harder in the habitat because they are 24 feet up. But we have binoculars, and we also can attach the chip reader to a pole and be able to read their chip if we need to. Great questions.
Okay, thank you. Did you reduce your winter feed amount to avoid waste?
We do that, and then we also may increase it. So the majority of the food we are giving to the bats in the night holding. You know, we had talked about, okay, they're not in the night holding for very long. They're going back into the day roosts for breeding. Do we feed them out there? But I think after we got the results of the weights and the scale, we realized that they regulated themselves very well. And if we did put extra food out there, they probably wouldn't eat it. They are defending territories and fussing with each other during that breeding time. And like I said, we don't have girls, so all this is going on even with the absence of the females.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any suggestions if you don't have an area like your transfer? Is getting weights in the open an option?
Well, it is, and I love when we are all thinking outside of the box, you know, as many people as you can get together, or definitely networking to try to figure out the best way, because really the hardest part is to actually see the weight. So if you can some type of move a reader to where you can see it, even if the bats go on the scale at a higher elevation. I mean, I think that there are different types of ways. It's just trying to figure it all out. And I'll tell you what, when we got this scale, I still sometimes don't understand how it works, but it just was a game changer for us.
Thank you. Did you find out if weight changes are due to differences in food consumption or something less direct? Okay,
so both. So the bats, when they start losing the weight, they're pretty heavy. We know from some of the literature it's studying the wild bats, they do gain a lot of weight and are big and beefy waiting on these girls. And I think with that, you know, we just kind of used our data for that and kind of determined what we were going to need. And we didn't have to really adjust. They kind of adjusted the diet for themselves.
Okay, thank you. And how did you encourage them to transition to the two areas?
Okay, so that is a great question. So when we initially, we did put some food in the transfer tunnels when we first got the new group of bats. And we put some food in the transfer tunnels, and then we did have some food in the exhibit, but it was mostly them exploring and trying to figure out different areas. When we first got the bats, we would keep them in the holding area for a while and then slowly let them move back and forth until they transitioned. But because the majority of their diet is fed in the back holding area, there definitely is motivation to come back. So
Okay, thank
many.
you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and have
Yeah,
you ever
definitely.
tried using a hanging weight scale in the main area to see if they may use it and give you an additional measurement?
Well, we haven't, the bats are so spread out in this large habitat. So we haven't really tried to hang anything out there. Now, the scale is in the transition area. So fortunately for us, we're able to get weights as they go out to the habitat. But if we don't, we can get them when they come back in, when they shift back in. So it's very versatile to catch them going out into the habitat or coming in at night. And during the winter months, the bats are very reliable at coming home. They are usually lined up and ready to shift in at about 5 o'clock. And they're in a hurry to get back into the back area for food. Now in the summertime, it's a little bit different. You know, it is getting towards breeding season. They are beefy. They're not in as big of a hurry. And when they do end up coming into the back, we've got camera footage. They come back for just a couple of hours and then head back out. So we do have some opportunities to get the weight. So we haven't tried to put a scale out on the habitat.
Okay, thank you, Susan.